A highly charged debate in Parliament as both the opposition and the government's biggest ally, the DMK, stepped up pressure on India to vote against Sri Lanka when the top human rights body of the UN meets next week in Geneva. Photos released by UK's Channel 4 suggested that the 12-year-old son of LTTE chief Prabhakaran was executed in cold blood in 2009. Those photographs were referred to by speaker after speaker demanding India make a stand. Salman Khurshid's response seemed to underline just how tough a balancing act this has become for the government. The government's ambivalence triggering an angry walkout by the BJP and the DMK.
Let India not merely vote in the UNHRC. Let India, sir, take the lead in drafting the resolution in the UNHRC. Foreign policy is not conducted out of fear. Foreign policy is conducted out of confidence.
Sir, Tamil Nadu consists more than 8 crore people. We are looking at you. We are looking at you. We are asking you, what are you going to do?
ये सवाल तमिल भाइयों का नहीं है, पूरे भारत का है। उत्तर दक्षिण पूरब पश्चिम हम भारत के लोग जो वहाँ जुल्म हो रहे हैं हमारे तमिल भाइयों के खिलाफ, हम उनके साथ खड़े हैं। आपको हनुमान बन के वहाँ पता करना पड़ेगा और क्या क्या गड़बड़ हुआ।
सर आपकी अगर आप हनुमान बन जाएं तो सारे मसले हल हो जाएंगे। And what we do must be effective, and what we do must be clear. And it must not be lukewarm, as I have been told that you should not be lukewarm. But how we do it and what we do it, that freedom must be left to the government to be able to translate your wishes and your desires in a proper manner diplomatically, so we achieve what we want to achieve.
Weeks before the UN Human Rights Conference begins its latest session in Geneva, India under pressure to support a US-sponsored resolution against Sri Lanka, asking it to investigate allegations of war crimes and human rights violations during the war against LTTE. Chilling photographs of LTTE chief Velupillai Prabhakaran's 12-year-old son just before execution from Channel 4 documentary No Fire Zone have added to the pressure.
Sir, he was shot point blank. Point blank, sir. You can see the innocent face, sir, when he was eating there, very shyly, whatever that. Sir, his close bodyguards were tied the back and shot right before him.
India had last year voted against Sri Lanka on a US-sponsored resolution at the UN for promoting reconciliation and accountability in Sri Lanka. But now the demand is for India to support a stronger resolution. But the PM's response in Parliament was evasive. He said, "Our decision will depend on the substance of the final text tabled in the Council." Which way New Delhi will go in the next vote in UNHRC is anybody's guess, but pressure from political parties on the one hand and the need to continue its engagement with Colombo on the other makes it a tough choice for India. With A. Vaidyanathan and Nitin Gokhale in New Delhi, Vijay Kumar for NDTV.
We're asking tonight, is it time for India to take a stand on Sri Lanka? You can take part in our debate via second screen on your Android and iOS devices. Just tap second screen on your NDTV app to look at our questions tonight. You can vote on our questions or post your own. The ones that get the maximum votes will feature on our show. Well, joining us tonight, TK Elangovan, Lok Sabha MP of the DMK, D. Raja, National Secretary of the CPI, Manishankar Iyer, Rajya Sabha MP and Senior Congress Leader. We're also joined by Colonel Anil Kaul, who was part of the IPKF in Jaffna, recipient of the Veer Chakra. He's been at the forefront of the battle against the LTTE and even written about it. We're also being joined here in the studio by G. Parthasarathy, former diplomat, foreign policy expert, and someone who's also worked very, very closely on Sri Lanka. Also joining us tonight from London, Callum McRae, director of the very controversial Channel 4 documentary Sri Lanka's Killing Fields, which is also likely to be shown at that UN meeting in Geneva. But Mr. Elangovan, let me begin with you first. Tonight, your party walking out of Parliament when Salman Khurshid was responding on behalf of that government. Do you believe that the government is just dodging at this point, taking a stand?
No, no. Our question was, see, already the U.S. resolution was in the media. Everybody had the U.S. resolution with them. I don't know what made the Congress to wait to go through the lines of the resolution, and I don't know what amendments they are going to suggest, because a resolution should be so strong that such human rights violations should not happen in Sri Lanka. But this government is not very reluctant in agreeing that they will support the resolution, before which they want to study the resolution. If they want the resolution to be stronger, then there is meaning. But whether to support in favor of the resolution or not, itself they want to go through the resolution means we didn't understand what they meant.
Manisha Karayar, we heard Salman Khurshid today speaking, in a sense, making arguments for both supporting and voting against the resolution. Why is India sending out kind of mixed signals at the moment?
Yeah, that is what we don't understand. Earlier they had.
All right, that question was to Manisha Karayar. I'll come back to you, Mr. Langovan.
Okay. I don't think our position is at all ambiguous. I, as a former Foreign Service officer and one who's been involved in several UN negotiations, including negotiations that have taken place in the Subcommission on Human Rights, and that too in connection with Sri Lanka, because back in 1983, when the issue was agitated first there in a major way, I was heading the UN division. I know that these matters have to be dealt with in a mode that is not the same as takes place in Parliament. In Parliament, we have listened to the very, very strong views expressed by different sections of the House, and having taken note of them, we said that once we get to Geneva, where there will be negotiations on the text, it's not a question of strengthening or weakening the text. It's a question of examining the text and ensuring that in language which is in keeping with the traditional UN language, we say what we have to say. But I don't think the government of India is unaware of the very, very strong feelings that not only run in Tamil Nadu on this question, but I'm glad to say after today's report, in the country as a whole, this is a national problem, not a Tamil issue, and it's being taken as such by the government. And I'm sure that we'll do our best to reflect as far as possible, but in UN language, the sentiments that have been
why
expressed.
not at least make that clear in Parliament?
Because on all issues of international relations, there is more than one dimension. This is one dimension, but we wish to continue to have an influence in Sri Lanka. We wish to be true to our basic principles of peaceful coexistence, that is the Panchsheel, and it is within that framework that we will work on it. Why assume, as some people seem to do, that the whole purpose of this is to fudge the issue? It's not.
D. Raja, Manisha Karayar seems to be making the point that it has to be a balance of politics and practicality. I can see you disagreeing over there.
Considering the stature of India in the Committee of Nations, considering the aspiration of India to become permanent member of the UN Security Council, India cannot be an onlooker. India cannot be a silent spectator when a serious issue is being discussed in the current session of the UN Human Rights Commission at Geneva. India should play a proactive role, and role which can allow India to look into the text
says India does not want to play Big Brother.
No, it is not the question of Big Brother. It is question of a sovereign nation. India being a sovereign nation, Sri Lanka being another sovereign nation, and it is immediate neighbor to us. India knows fully well what happened in Sri Lanka. India knows fully well what is happening in Sri Lanka. India can be the best judge on the issue of warrantless war crimes and human rights violations in Sri Lanka. Without the knowledge of India, nothing happened. Even war did not take place without the knowledge of India, without the help of India. Therefore, India has a moral position, moral responsibility, ethical responsibility. India should become proactive, and India should be an active player, even in strengthening that resolution and bringing an accountability on the part of Sri Lanka. India should demand an international investigation into war crimes and human rights violations, and India should see the text of the resolution, and India should become party to the text of the resolution and see that Sri Lanka is...
Right, let me just bring
India
in
should vote against Sri Lanka, that's what I am saying.
Alright, G. Parthasarathi, we heard Salman Khurshid saying today that India was in favour of a transparent, independent probe looking into war crimes violations, into human rights violations. Is it enough to say that? Or do we need to, as we're hearing from a cross-section of parties, just take a far harder step?
We knew last year that the Americans are going to come with another resolution. And rather than play second fiddle to the Americans, we should have been taking the lead. Now, what are the aspects involved? The human rights violations.
Exactly.
No, just a minute, Mr. Raja. What are the human rights violations? Let me tell you, I have been in 7 times to Jaffna when the IPKF was there, and the LTT invariably used innocent Tamilians as shields. Using innocent Tamilians as shields has been an LTT thing. And as far as I am concerned, in the final stages of the war, the LTT used artillery, used weapons from crowded Tamil populations which surrounding them. So everybody is guilty. Now the point is, you have to look ahead. South Africa solved such issues not by recrimination but by reconciliation. What we have to work in the UN is to get a framework which establishes responsibility independently and works reconciliation. It doesn't become a fault-finding commission. Secondly, the fact of the matter is, and I don't know why this government does not acknowledge it pays lip service to Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, but does not recognize the most salient agreement he signed, which was the 1987 Indo-Sri Lankan Accord. Even Mr. Yashwant Sinha today spoke about it being the centerpiece of devolution. So anything which comes in, first has to promote national reconciliation, second has to ensure devolution as promised. We can't evade that responsibility. We were a party to the 1987 agreement in which we promised certain things to the Tamils. We have to deliver, and no point in going and saying, as Mr. Salman Khurshid says, we don't want to be a big brother. Let me say that before we Jayawardene agreed, he tried to starve the Tamils, and we moved in with an airlift back with fighter escorts. We don't have to do all that again. The world has changed. But for God's sake, don't become so dormant.
All right, Manishankar Iyer, come in on this. President Rajapakse has clearly not kept his word on devolution of power. 3 years along the line, there seems to be very little difference on the ground. Should India, in a sense, then be supporting a regime which seems to have gone back on at least that one big promise?
We are not supporting the regime. It's a regime that has not been elected by the Indian people. It's a regime that's been elected democratically by the people of Sri Lanka. And I don't know why Mr. Parthasarathi thinks the government of India has forgotten the 1987 agreement. On the contrary, it's the centerpiece of the India-Sri Lanka relationship in the context of all that happened between the LTT and other Tamil groups on the one hand, and the government of Jayawardene on the other. And there are certainly possibilities of pressing the Sri Lankan government, which I am sure are being invoked, and there are limits to the extent to which you can compel another sovereign country to do what it is that you want, and indeed might prove counterproductive to do so. And therefore, while I completely agree with Salman Khurshid that we should play big brother to no one, and certainly not to those in our neighborhood, we should leverage our partnership with them to try and secure our goals. And it is within that framework that we are looking to see how we use Geneva to leverage that. And in Geneva, unlike in the Indian Parliament, the Sri Lankan representatives will be present and they'll be making a case, and it is required in international fora that we listen to each other and then we work on these resolutions behind